Slide. Williams takes the baseline. A monster jam for Jayson Williams.
On the charge of hindering apprehension, which is the third-degree crime, on the charge of tampering with witnesses, which is also a third-degree crime, on each of those matters it will be a 5-year term in state prison.
From being named an NBA All-Star to receiving a career-ending injury its very next season, the story of Jayson Williams' career is very tragic. But unfortunately, his life after the NBA gets even more tragic. So today, we're going to find out why that is by taking a look at some of Jayson's most controversial moments. We'll review why he gets criticized for these moments, and at the end of each story, I'm going to be determining whether his criticism is fair or not. So without further ado, let's get started with story number 1. Jayson Williams' NBA career began in 1990 when he was selected in the first round by the Phoenix Suns. The problem is, Jayson didn't really want to play in Phoenix, which makes sense because he grew up in New York, so naturally he wanted to play in a city that was closer to his hometown. Apparently, the only thing he knew about Phoenix at the time was that it was hot and that it had a lot of pickup trucks. So when it was announced that Williams was going to the Suns, Jayson wasn't exactly happy about this, as he literally shouted at his TV screen, "Oh no, I'm not," as soon as he got drafted. Not exactly the best way to jumpstart your career with a new organization. However, things would only get worse when Williams arrived in Phoenix for training camp, as the night before his flight, Jayson spent the evening drinking and partying at a nightclub in New York until 5:30 in the morning, just 30 minutes before his plane would take off. Now, fortunately, Jayson did make it onto his flight in time. However, just because the night was over doesn't mean that the drinking had to end. And it certainly didn't, because Williams continued drinking not only on the plane, but also in his hotel room once he arrived in Phoenix. Enough to the point of passing out. So when Jayson woke back up in his hotel room, he quickly realized that he had no clue where he was. In fact, Jayson drank so much that he had completely forgotten about the plane ride in general and still thought he was in New York. But he wasn't sure about that, so he decided to go look outside his window, and sure enough, he saw nothing but desert. Now, this is the part where our story gets kind of insane, because rather than thinking logically about why there could be a desert outside, Williams instead assumed that he must still be in New York and that somebody had dropped a bomb on the city. Yes, like an actual bomb. Now, it is important to note that the Cold War was happening at this time, so it does make Jayson's assumption a little less crazy, but it's still pretty wild nonetheless. To make matters even worse, as Williams was freaking out about the bomb, he then heard a loud knock at his door and answered it in his underwear just to see the owner of the Phoenix Suns standing there. Jerry Colangelo then looks at him and he says, "Jayson?" Then Williams, who was still in a panic from earlier, shouted, "What happened? They dropped the bomb on us. Where am I?" Jerry just looks back at him and says, "Oh my, we've got a problem." A few weeks after this incident, Colangelo called Williams in for a meeting in regards to his poor attitude, and of course that meeting didn't go very well either. According to Williams' biography, Colangelo allegedly told him that he was overweight and out of shape, and even made fun of Jayson's alma mater, St. John's, just to get a little bit of a rise out of him. If that was the plan, then it definitely worked, because Jayson knocked everything off of Colangelo's desk and immediately stormed out of his office before taking a flight back home to New York. Eventually, Williams would have to return back to Phoenix, and when he did, he received a brand new Pontiac Grand Prix from the Suns organization for being the team's first round pick. However, even this still upset Jayson because apparently the team's second round pick received a Cadillac, which is what he would have preferred. So out of anger, Williams took his new car into the Suns parking lot and proceeded to crash into every single pole he saw before giving the car back to them completely ruined. But do you want to know what the funny part about this whole story is? The Suns didn't even get mad over this. In fact, they actually bought him another car because they thought that Williams was genuinely upset about his last one being too small and not because he wanted to get traded. Well, they were wrong, because Williams immediately crashed his second car right after getting it. Like, talk about being wasteful. I mean, did he really have to do that a second time? Did his first crash not prove enough of a point? The final nail in the coffin, though, happened a few weeks later when Williams and the Suns were unable to reach a contract agreement. Jayson had an offer from a professional team in Italy for $750,000. However, due to how much of a head case Williams had been up to this point, Phoenix wasn't willing to offer anything close to that amount, only willing to offer the rookie a minimum contract worth $170,000. Williams then threatened to play overseas if the Suns didn't pay him, and with Phoenix being completely fed up about the whole situation, they just decided that it would be best for everybody involved to simply trade Williams. So, a few days before the regular season began, Williams was shipped off to Philadelphia in exchange for a 1994 first-round pick, meaning that Jayson was finally going to get his wish playing in a city closer to his hometown. In my opinion, Jayson Williams' relationship with the Suns was one that was destined to fail from the very beginning, simply because Jayson never wanted to play for Phoenix in the first place, so as a result, he never gave the Suns a fair chance. Because in each one of these stories, Jayson could have done something different to change Colangelo's opinion on him, but he just didn't care to make a good impression at all. So if I was a Suns fan, I would definitely have some hate in my heart for this man. Real quick, if you guys have been enjoying the video so far, then don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. But other than that, let's move on to number 2, the death of Gus Christophe. February 14, 2002 is a date that Jayson Williams will never forget, as his life hasn't been the same ever since. At just 33 years old, Williams had already been out of the league for a few years at this point, and like many other former players, Jayson loved hosting parties at his massive 40-room mansion, and this night wasn't supposed to be any different. After attending a Globetrotter game with some friends from his travel team, Williams wanted to go out for drinks with everybody, but he needed someone sober to drive. So he called a limo driver by the name of Gus Christophe to take him and his friends out for drinks and then back to Jayson's house later on. It was a pretty smooth night for the most part, but once they got back to the house, that's when everything changed. Williams had invited everyone back inside, including Gus Christophe, for a grand tour of his mansion. And as the evening continued, some of his visitors split off into a different part of the house, while Christophe and a few others followed Williams into the master bedroom to check out his gun collection. While they were in there, Jayson grabbed his double-barreled shotgun off the wall and started showing it off, opening its barrel so everyone could see. However, as this was going on, Williams never checked to see if the safety switch was on, so when he went to close the gun back up, that was when it happened. Mr. Christophe had been shot dead, right in the chest, as he was only standing about 4 feet away when the gun fired. In a last-ditch effort to try and save his life, Williams performed CPR on Christophe, but unfortunately it didn't work. So Jayson, who was completely freaked out at this point, made a quick decision and tried to cover up the crime. Jayson's brother Santiago helped him out by calling 911 and reported the shooting as a suicide. Meanwhile, Jayson and another man were busy wiping down the shotgun, then repositioned it into Christophe's hands so that way his fingerprints would be on the gun, making their story more likely to check out. And finally, Williams took off his clothes that were covered in blood and proceeded to jump in the swimming pool to clean off. Although, this didn't really matter all that much because it wouldn't take too long until one of the witnesses gave up Jayson and told investigators the real story. Williams was then indicted for aggravated manslaughter, reckless manslaughter, and witness/evidence tampering, among other charges. Although his trial wouldn't actually get solved for another 8 years, as he was acquitted of aggravated manslaughter at his first trial in 2004, but the jury was at a deadlock on the count of reckless manslaughter, setting the stage for a retrial that would end up getting delayed for 6 more years. However, after Williams pleaded guilty to an aggravated assault charge, the state decided to amend his indictment on the charge of reckless manslaughter. So as a result, on February 23, 2010, the judge sentenced Williams to 5 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months. He also gave him an additional 8 months for a separate DUI charge that had happened a month before. So really a minimum of 26 months, which is exactly how much time he served, as Williams was released from custody on April 13, 2012. Honestly, I'm pretty surprised that Williams only got about 2 years for this, because he literally killed a man and then tried to cover it up. Like, the only thing I can think of that would be worse than this would be if he had done it intentionally. But he didn't, so I won't act like he did. In reality, Williams actually felt very guilty and regrets the way he handled the whole situation to this day, claiming that there isn't a day that goes by where he doesn't think about it, and even acknowledged himself as a selfish coward for trying to cover it up. Due to this, even with as horrible of a mistake as it was still a mistake, so I can't say what Jayson did is unforgivable, especially since Gus Christophe's sister allegedly wrote him a letter forgiving Jayson for his actions. However, this is a memory that's going to continue to haunt Jayson for the rest of his life, as he quickly turned into an alcoholic for a few years after being released. Nowadays though, Williams has gotten sober and even runs his own drug and alcohol treatment facility, so it is nice to see that he's turned his life around at least, but the question is, should Jayson Williams still be considered one of the NBA's most hated players? Because I don't think so. Now, he may have some of the craziest stories I've ever seen, though. To be honest, I can make a whole nother video on just those stories alone, so let me know if you want to see that video in the future. But other than that, that's the end of today's video. My name is T Pointer. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more NBA storytelling content like this in the future. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, I'll see you all later.